My mother-in-law handed me the mug herself, both hands, like she was offering me something sacred. Chamomile, she said, for your nerves. The drive up must have been exhausting. I smiled and wrapped my fingers around the ceramic. It was a 4-hour drive from Toronto to their place outside Barrie, and yes, I was tired. But I was not nervous. I had stopped being nervous around Joanne 18 months ago, around the same time I started keeping notes. What she did not know, what none of them knew, was that I had watched her dissolve something into that tea 12 minutes earlier. I was standing at the top of the stairs, still in my coat, and I could see straight down into the kitchen through the gap in the railing. She used a small amber bottle. She stirred it with a spoon, rinsed the spoon immediately, dried it, put it back in the drawer. Efficient. Practiced. I sat down at the kitchen table. The mug was warm in my hands. Before I tell you who drank from that mug and what was in it, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment below. What is the one thing your family did that you excused for years, that you should have never, ever excused? I want to read your answers. I read every single one. You probably want to know why I was still there. Why I kept making that drive, kept sitting at that table, kept smiling at a woman who looked at me like I was something temporary. Something to be tolerated until a better option came along. The honest answer is that I stayed because of my husband. And I stayed because I was raised to believe that keeping the peace was the same thing as being good. That if you just kept your head down and worked hard and never complained, people would eventually see who you were and treat you accordingly. I was wrong about that. It took me a long time to understand that some people will only ever see you as a function, not a person. A function. My name is Brooke. I am 31 years old. I am a licensed practical nurse. I work 12-hour shifts, often nights, and I have for the past 6 years. My husband is Ethan. We met in our mid-20s, got married 2 years ago, and for most of our relationship, I told myself his family was just a lot. That's what I called it. A lot. Like they were just a personality type, a quirk, a learning curve I hadn't fully gotten through yet. His mother, Joanne, runs the household. That is the only way to describe it. Ethan's father, who everyone calls Pop, does what she says and always has. Ethan's younger sister, Sky, is 24, lives at home, and has never held a job for more than 3 months. She is the one Joanne talks about in the proud voice. Sky is figuring things out. Sky is sensitive. Sky is the kind of person who still gets her laundry done for her and refers to her childhood bedroom as my room with the possessiveness of someone who has never really left it. Then there is me, the one who married in. Ethan and I lived 40 minutes from his parents for the first year of our marriage. Then Joanne called one evening in February. Her voice was careful and controlled in the way her voice always got when she wanted something large. Pop had taken on a second mortgage on the house when Ethan was in college. She did not explain why. She said the payments had become unmanageable and that they were looking at losing the property if something did not change. She said it the way people say it when they are not really asking. They are just giving you the information and waiting for you to volunteer. I looked at Ethan across the kitchen. His face had gone the particular pale it went when his family called with problems. I already knew what was going to happen before he opened his mouth. We had $34,000 in a joint savings account. It had taken us 3 years to put that away. It was supposed to be a down payment on our own place. That was the plan. That was what we had been working toward. We gave them $22,000. Ethan said it was a loan. I did not say anything. I had already learned by then that certain conversations with Ethan about his family were like pressing on a bruise. You could do it, but there was a limit to how hard before he shut down completely. So I said okay. I transferred the money. I kept the records. 3 months later, Joanne mentioned, casually, at dinner, not even looking at me, that Sky had just booked a trip to Portugal with a friend. 10 days. Business class because Sky couldn't sleep on planes otherwise. Nobody said anything about the loan. Nobody said a word. I drove home that night, and I sat in our car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before going upstairs. I was not crying. I was doing something more dangerous. I was doing the math. That was 18 months ago. That was when I started keeping the file. It was not dramatic. I did not decide to become someone who keeps files. I am a nurse. I document things. It is just how my brain works. At first, I was documenting for myself, just to confirm that I was not losing my mind, that things were actually happening the way I thought they were happening. When Joanne told her friends that Ethan bought his parents a new refrigerator which was technically true, though she had picked it out and handed him the bill. I wrote it down. When Sky borrowed my car for a weekend and returned it with a dent in the rear bumper, and Joanne said I was being dramatic for being upset about it, I wrote it down. When I found a birthday card Joanne had written to Ethan that said, among other things, I hope she realizes how lucky she is, I photographed it and added it to the file. I want to be clear about something. I did not hate Joanne. I do not think I ever did. Even at the worst of it, what I felt was more like a cold, slow-growing clarity. The kind that builds up over months the way ice does. Quietly, without drama, until one day, something tries to walk across it and the whole surface holds. The week before the trip to Barrie, Ethan got a call from Pop. I heard Ethan's side of it from the hallway. Short sentences, long pauses, his voice going tight in that way it did. Afterward, he sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. There's a problem, he said. The second mortgage had not been the only one. There was a line of credit Pop had opened 4 years ago and had been drawing on steadily. Between the two, they were sitting on $68,000 in debt that was now in collections. The house was not yet in foreclosure, but it was getting close. The collections agency had given them 60 days. They had used 40 of them before telling Ethan. They need help, Ethan said. I sat down next to him. I was very calm. I had learned to be very calm during these conversations. What kind of help? I said. It was not a question. I already knew. He could not look at me. They're asking if we could consolidate it. Take it on. We'd be listed on the property. I had a number in my head. I said it out loud. That's $68,000, Ethan. I know. We have $12,000 left in savings. I know. We were going to use that too. I know, Brooke. His voice broke slightly on my name, not with anger, with shame. He knew. He knew exactly what it meant. He just could not say no to them. He had never learned how. I looked at my hands for a moment. Then I looked at him. I'll take care of it, I said. But I need something in return. He looked up. If we pay this off, we go on title. Legally. Proper documentation through a lawyer. Not a handshake, not a promise, paperwork. He nodded slowly. I think he expected me to ask for more. I think some part of him was relieved that I had reduced the whole thing to something concrete and manageable. A transaction, terms. What Ethan did not know, and what I did not tell him, was that I had already spoken to a real estate lawyer 2 weeks earlier. I had explained our situation in general terms and asked what options existed. She had explained the process of being added to a title clearly. She had also explained what rights that conveyed. We drove up to Barrie on a Saturday. We sat at their kitchen table. Pop could not look at me directly. Joanne made tea. We went through the numbers. I had printed the documents. I had already arranged the transfer through my bank. Joanne said at one point, "We'll pay you back, of course." Her voice was the kind of warmth that only appears when someone needs something from you. I smiled and said, I know. We paid the debt. The lawyer filed the paperwork the following week. Ethan and I were added to the title. We drove home in mostly silence. 2 weeks after that, I sat down with Ethan and told him I thought we needed to stop subsidizing his family's expenses. He did not take it well. There were 3 days of difficult conversations. He said I was being cold. I said I was being honest. He said his family needed support. I said we were not a bank. He said that was cruel. I said, quietly, that I had given $22,000 of our savings and then $68,000 of our future to people who sent his sister to Portugal and never once thanked me by name. Not once. Not a card, not a phone call, not a text. He went quiet. He sat with that for a while. He did not fully agree with me. But he stopped arguing. The following month, Joanne called twice. Both times Ethan said we were tight right now. Things were complicated. Both times she said she understood and then called back 3 days later to ask again. I started to understand that the math had shifted. I was no longer useful as a cash flow. But I was still on that title. And that meant something I had not fully calculated yet. But apparently Joanne had. I found out about the insurance policy the same way I found out about most things in that house, by accident and then by not looking away. I was in Pop's study looking for a pen. They had asked me to sign a birthday card for a cousin and then wandered off, and I opened the wrong drawer. There was a manila envelope sitting on top of a folder of old utility bills. The tab on the folder said my name. I opened the envelope. It was a life insurance policy. Accidental death and dismemberment. Coverage for $750,000. My name on the insured line. The beneficiaries were Joanne and Pop, 50-50. The signature at the bottom was mine, or something close enough to mine that I understood immediately how much thought had gone into it. I stood in that room for a long time. The house was quiet. I could hear Ethan and Sky talking in the backyard, their voices carrying faintly through the window. I put the envelope back exactly where I found it. I walked out of the study, found a pen on the kitchen counter, signed his birthday card, and set it on the table. That evening, I excused myself early with a headache. I lay in the dark in the guest room and I thought about the filing drawer on my side of our closet at home, where I kept the folder. And I thought about the difference between suspecting something and knowing it. We drove home the next morning. I said almost nothing. That week, I bought a small recording device, the kind that looks like a USB thumb drive, available at any electronics store in Canada, legal to use in any space where you are a property owner or a consenting party. I was on that title. I had every legal right to be in that house and to record conversations I was a part of. I also called a friend from nursing school who now works in toxicology. I did not tell her why. I described a theoretical scenario involving common cardiac medications, the kind that appear in many older households, and I asked what a dangerous dose would look like and what the symptoms of exposure would be. She told me. She did not ask why I was asking. We have known each other for 11 years. The weekend of the autumn trip, Ethan's cousin was getting married 3 hours away. Ethan flew out Friday morning. I told him I would drive up to Barrie's separately to check on his parents, that I had a gift for his mother, that I'd meet him at the wedding venue Saturday afternoon. He thought that was kind of me. He said so. I arrived at the house at 2 in the afternoon. Joanne was home. Sky was upstairs. Pop was doing something in the garage. I put the recording device in the kitchen, clipped inside the decorative ceramic pot Joanne kept near the window with a small trailing plant in it. It had been sitting in the same spot for 4 years. I had brought it a new succulent as a hostess gift, which gave me a natural reason to be near it and rearranging things without it looking strange. Then I went back to my car with my actual bag and came in through the front door again, and we had coffee and Joanne talked about the wedding and about Sky and about Pop's back. I stayed for dinner. I was planning to drive to the venue afterward and check into the hotel with Ethan. Joanne made chamomile tea as I was helping clear the plates. I said yes when she offered me a cup, and I went to use the bathroom. When I came back down, both mugs were on the table. She handed me mine with both hands. I sat down. I wrapped my fingers around it. I let the warmth come through the ceramic. Across the kitchen, Sky had come downstairs and was helping herself to leftovers from the fridge, still in her sweats, headphones around her neck. She looked at the mugs on the table. "Is there more?" she asked. "This is the last of the chamomile," Joanne said. Sky looked at my mug. "Brooke doesn't even like tea. She always says it tastes like lawn clippings." That was true. I had said that. A long time ago at a Christmas dinner as a joke. Sky had remembered. I looked at Sky. She was already drifting toward the table, the way she always did, like all spaces were naturally hers to occupy. "Do you want it?" I said. I kept my voice easy. I was actually going to skip it. I have the drive tonight, and caffeine-free or not, it'll make me have to stop twice on the highway. Joanne's head came up fast. "It's fine," I said, pushing the mug slightly toward the center of the table. "She can have it. I'll just get some water." Joanne's hand moved. It was a small movement, instinctive, reaching toward the mug. She stopped herself almost immediately. Not fast enough. Sky had already wrapped both hands around it. "Joanne," Pop said from the doorway. He had come in from the garage. His voice was strange, flat. He was looking at his wife. Joanne looked at him. Some kind of communication passed between them. The same way it does between people who have lived together long enough that they have whole conversations in the space of a glance. He did not stop Sky. He looked at the mug in his daughter's hands, and he did not say a word. Later, I would think about that moment more than any other. Because Pop was passive. He'd always been passive. He let Joanne run the household, run the finances, run the relationships. But passive is not the same as innocent. He stood in that doorway, looked at his daughter holding a mug she did not know was poisoned, and he made a choice by not making one. The cruelest choices often look like doing nothing. "Bitter," Sky said, wrinkling her nose after the first sip. "What did you put in this, Mom? Actual grass?" "Honey," Joanne said. Her voice was odd. "Too high. Actually, don't. It's very strong. I probably steeped it too long. I'm already halfway through it." Sky shrugged and set it back down, reaching for her phone. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. I stayed at the table. I made normal conversation. I asked Pop about his back. I asked Joanne about the seating at the wedding. I watched Sky scroll through her phone. Sky put her phone down. She blinked, rubbed her eyes once. Weird, she said. I feel kind of. She did not finish the sentence. She listed sideways on her stool, reached for the counter to catch herself, and missed. Joanne was screaming before Sky hit the floor. I was already moving. I am a nurse. My body does not wait for my brain in those moments. I was on my knees beside Sky before the stool stopped rocking. Her pulse was there, but wrong, slow and irregular. Her color was already changing. Her breathing was shallow in the particular way that tells you the heart is working harder than it should. Call 911, I said. Not loud, controlled. Joanne was reaching for her daughter. She must have, Joanne, look at me. I waited until she did. Call 911, right now. Tell them suspected digoxin toxicity. Say those words exactly. Do you hear me? Pop had his phone out. His hands were shaking. Digoxin toxicity, I said again, clear and slow. If they think this is a stomach bug, they will waste time she does not have. Pop looked at me. His face had gone the color of old paper. What are you saying? Joanne whispered. I'm saying that the tea was not just tea. I held her gaze. And that if you want your daughter to survive tonight, you need to tell the dispatcher exactly what's in her system. There was a silence that lasted probably 3 seconds and felt like a month. I don't know what you're talking about, Joanne said. Her voice had gone cold. Defensive. She was already building the wall. I reached into my back pocket and I put my phone on the floor between us. The recording app was open. It had been running since I sat down at the table. But that was not the only thing. I tilted the screen so she could see it clearly. It was the playback from the recording device in the ceramic pot, already auto-synced to my phone. 2 hours of audio, including the part about 40 minutes before I arrived, where Joanne had called someone and said, clearly and without ambiguity, that she wanted to know how long it would take before they could make a claim, that she was tired of waiting, that they had given us enough time to figure it out and it wasn't working. The person on the other end had said, the policy looks clean. Once there's a death certificate, it's typically 4 to 8 weeks to process. Joanne's face went completely still. Outside, the sirens were already getting closer. I had called from the bathroom before dinner, before the tea was poured, just to make sure they were in range. I had told the dispatcher that I was a nurse, that I had reason to believe someone in the house might be exposed to a cardiac leukocyte, and that I needed units close by. They had not questioned me. Here are your options, I said quietly, under the sound of the sirens. Option 1. You keep saying you don't know what I'm talking about. Sky dies, and I hand everything I have to the police, including the policy with the forged signature, including the recording. That's not an accident investigation, that's a criminal one. Joanne made a sound. Option 2, I said. You tell them exactly what she was given. They treat her correctly. She has a chance, and then you deal with what you did. Pop's voice from the doorway was barely audible. Tell them, he said. He was looking at his daughter on the floor, and something in him, whatever it was that had made him stand in that doorway and say nothing, had finally broken. Just tell them. Joanne cracked. She told the dispatcher. She used the words I gave her. Her voice was a wreck, but the words were right. The paramedics came in fast. There were 2 officers behind them. I stood back and let the room become what it needed to be. Oxygen, IV lines, a defibrillator pad being positioned just in case. The particular focused quiet of people who know exactly what they are doing. I walked to the officer nearest the door. I had a USB drive in my coat pocket. I had prepared it 2 nights earlier. I'm the one who called ahead, I said. I'm a nurse, and I'm also the person whose name is on a fraudulent life insurance policy in that house. Everything you need is on here. The policy, a recording from tonight, and documentation I've been keeping for the past 18 months, including records of $90,000 in financial transfers that were represented to my husband as family loans. He looked at the drive. He looked at me. He took it. Sky was in the ICU for 4 days. Digoxin toxicity is treatable when it's caught fast enough and when the right people know what they're dealing with. She was lucky. We both know she was lucky. Joanne and Pop were arrested that night. Pop was processed and released on conditions pending the investigation. Joanne was held on the strength of the recording. Ethan found out at the hotel when I called him. He drove through the night. He sat in the hospital parking lot for an hour before he came inside. I know because I was watching from the window. I do not know what that hour looked like for him. I do not know what he was working through. Some part of me does not want to know. What I know is that when he finally walked in and sat down next to me in the waiting room, he did not speak for a long time. And then he said, "How long did you know that something was wrong?" 18 months. That it had gotten to this? 3 weeks. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at him. Would you have believed me? He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the floor. I don't know, he said finally. And at least it was honest. Sky was different when she came out of the ICU, not in a dramatic movie way, not some overnight transformation, but she had heard things from the nurses about what had been in her system, and she had asked questions, and at some point, the answers had added up to something she could not unhear. She did not confront it right away. She sat with it for a while. She is still sitting with it, I think. She testified. It was the first time in her life that she did something that cost her personally. It had to have terrified her. She did it anyway. The charges against Joanne are serious. Administering a noxious substance, fraud, and because of the forged insurance documents, identity theft and attempted fraud over $5,000, which in Canada carries real weight. Pop is cooperating with the investigation. His charges are still being determined. The Crown is not treating it lightly. The house is in my name and Ethan's. We have not decided what to do with it. We are not living in it. We are not ready to make that decision yet. Ethan and I are still together. I want to be honest about what that looks like. It is not simple. There are weeks where I feel something like normal, and weeks where I sit across from him at dinner and think about all the times I transferred money I had worked nights for into accounts that went towards someone else's choices. We are in therapy, individually and together. The therapist does not tell us what to decide. She just helps us say the things we have been saying around. What I can tell you is this. The last 18 months, I was not waiting passively. I was not swallowing things and hoping they would go away. I was watching and documenting and learning exactly what I was dealing with because I understood. On some cellular level, the way you understand things you do not yet have words for, that the moment I made noise before I had evidence, everything would be explained away and I would be left looking like the difficult daughter-in-law with the chip on her shoulder. You do not confront people like Joanne. You collect people like Joanne. There is something I keep coming back to. The way she handed me that mug. Both hands. Like a gesture of care? Like something warm and safe on a cold evening after a long drive. I have thought about that a lot. About how the most dangerous offers sometimes look exactly like kindness. About how a person can spend years handing you things that are real dinners, real conversations, real moments, while also, somewhere in the back of her mind, knowing what she was working toward. I think she probably told herself it was not personal. I think people usually do. I am not angry anymore. I moved through anger months ago without even realizing it. What I am now is careful. I am someone who keeps records and reads things twice and does not confuse warmth with safety. That is what they made me. I am not grateful for it, but I am not ashamed of it either. The mug is still sitting on their kitchen table, probably. Joanne always forgot to clear the table before bed. I am sitting at my own table now. In our apartment in Toronto, coffee, not tea. It is 7 in the morning and I have a shift in 3 hours. Some people say you cannot choose your family. That is true. You cannot choose who you are born to or who you marry into. But you can choose what you do when you finally understand what you are looking at. You can choose to keep your head down and keep the peace. Or you can choose to hold very still and watch and wait and make sure that when it matters, you are the one who has the receipts. So tell me, have you ever been handed something that looked like kindness and turned out to be something else entirely? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you know someone who mistakes being needed for being loved, share this with them. They might need to hear it. There's a version of this story where I never bought the recording device, where I transferred the money, kept my head down, and told myself that things would eventually even out. I lived that version for 18 months. I know exactly what it feels like. The low-grade exhaustion of it. The way you start to second-guess your own memory of events. Because the people around you are so confident and so consistent in their version of things. What changed wasn't one dramatic moment. It was accumulation. The $22,000. Then the $68,000. Then my name on a policy I never signed. Those things did not happen to me because I was unlucky. They happened because I had made myself easy, not weak. I want to be precise about that. Easy. Predictable. Someone who could be counted on to absorb the cost of other people's choices without making it uncomfortable for anyone. Joanne did not wake up one morning and decide to be a person who poisons her daughter-in-law. I think she arrived there through 100 small decisions, each one slightly larger than the last, each one easier because the previous one had no real consequence. That is how people end up somewhere they never named out loud. Not a plan, exactly. More like a direction they kept walking in because nobody stopped them. What I understand now, sitting at my own table with my own coffee, is that the most important thing I did was not the recording device or the lawyer or the USB drive I handed to the officer. The most important thing I did was decide to see clearly. That sounds small. It was not small. Seeing clearly, when the people around you are invested in your not seeing, takes a particular kind of effort. It requires you to trust your own observations more than you trust the comfort of the explanation being offered to you. Ethan is still working through what his trust in his parents cost both of us. I think that is its own kind of grief. Realizing that the people who shaped you were not who you believed them to be. I am not going to rush that for him. I am also not going to carry it for him. Skye testified. She sat in that room and said what she saw, knowing it would put her mother away. I think about that more than I let on. She spent 24 years being the ornament, the protected one, the golden child. And then she found out that when it came down to it, she was currency, same as me. What she did with that information took more courage than I had expected from her. I have not forgotten it. The actions Joanne took came back to her in the most direct possible way. Through the evidence she never thought I was collecting. Through the daughter she never imagined would speak against her. Through the daughter-in-law she had spent years underestimating. That is not luck. That is the simple, unglamorous truths that choices compound. They build on each other. The choice to exploit builds the conditions for its own exposure. I am not the person I was 2 years ago. What this did to me is not something I would have chosen, but I am clearer now than I have ever been about what I will accept and what I will not, about the difference between someone who needs you and someone who values you, and about the fact that those two things are not the same. I kept the receipts. That's it. That's the whole thing. I paid attention, I documented, and I did not let anyone convince me that what I had seen was not what I had seen. If there is anything worth taking from this, it is that clarity is not something that just arrives. You have to decide to build it, and then you have to defend it quietly every single day until the moment it matters.